We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're gonna get kicked out of being number 2, you're gonna go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a 3rd grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. Which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the mountains. Good evening in the central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparations perspective, bringing you those free hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, socializing our suffering. Good evening, Twitter. Good evening, Facebook. Good evening, ScrewTube family. Thank you one and all for being here. I see you, ADOS children, Yaira, Kim Jackson, The Rock. I see you, family. And for those of you whom I can't see in Facebook and Twitter, welcome to the line. I've got a very, very, very special guest for you today. I'm not going to read the article completely, but let me give him a little bit of an introduction because we've only got 30 minutes with him, fam. 30 precious minutes, and I don't want to waste not a one. This article is dated June 30th, 22. California lawmakers reject ballot proposal that aim to end forced prison labor, aka slavery, in the private prison industrial complex. Samuel Brown, my guest tonight, was on the front lines of the pandemic, sanitizing and disinfecting prison cells. Diagnosed with asthma, Brown, 45, said he feared contracting the virus. He wanted to quit his prison job. He could not. Quote, "My supervisor told me I had to do this job," Brown said. I'm going to let him come on here and tell the rest. And then I'll dig into that article once he has to depart from us. But without further ado, let me introduce you to a brother that's cut from the DNA of our ancestors. This brother went from prison to author of the ACA 3 to end prison, to end slavery in the private prisons, the not so new slavery in the private prison industrial complex. He is here to share his testimony, to share his story, and to talk about the horrific time he spent behind bars and how through all of that hell, that virtual hell, for not just him, but for many of our brothers who have been locked up, how he managed to rise from the ashes like the phoenix he is, like the God he is, and managed to study and put himself in a position to fight to end slavery in the private prisons of California. Y'all know the ones that Kabami told the governor that she could not let the nonviolent offenders free because she needed free slave labor to put out the fires in the California hills of the white homes. Yeah, this brother right here had the genius, had the wherewithal. The ancestors and his inner Christ called him to the occasion. He answered the call to end slavery in the private prisons. I bring to you none other than the uncompromising brilliance, talent, boldness, Mr. Samuel Brown. Stand by, family. Let me add him to the stream.
Thank you very much. That was such a magnificent introduction, probably the best that I've ever had. It's an honor to be here to have this discussion with you, Angela. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for your faithful audience who's tuned in and has got their boots on the ground and dedicated to the struggle too.
It's such an honor to have you here. I had the privilege of meeting you at the recent Juneteenth festival that CJEC hosted down in Leimert Park. And right. I had heard about you from CJEC. You know, you've got a ton of fans over in that org. And rightfully so. Well deserved, well earned. And we had the luxury of meeting at that back in June. And I was jogging on this beach, jogging off my stress. And I saw your profile and I said, I know you. And then when you said, I know you too, and I could see you fully, I could take you in, I realized that bringing you to this channel was a divine assignment that I must fulfill. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
I don't have much time. Can you please tell us in as brief a bullet point as you can with 30 minutes? Could you please tell us how did you go from prison to take on the California Senate and House to get your ACA? First of all, how did you go from prison to being the author of such an important bill here in the state? Please
That's a great question, Angela. So I want you to know, and I want all of the listeners to know, I didn't get out of prison and wrote the bill. I wrote the bill while I was still incarcerated. I wrote the bill to end involuntary servitude and slavery in the carceral setting from my cell. And it was based on the fact that I had a job. My last job while I was incarcerated was a healthcare facility maintenance worker. And I was responsible for going inside the psych ward where people were committing suicide. They were spreading feces on the wall. They were cutting their wrists and the whole nine. The first person in the prison setting or in the carceral setting that tested positive for COVID-19 was in the prison that I was in. And because it was my job, I was the first person in the state of California to have to go inside of an office where a staff member tested positive for COVID. And then a prisoner, receiving it from the staff also tested positive for COVID. And so at that time, I was scheduled to go to the Board of Parole hearings. And the pandemic was still new, Angela. No one really knew what to expect. People were dying in Rome. People were dying in Spain. People were dying in New York in droves. And it was reminiscent of influenza 1919, the Black Plague, things that I had studied. And I was terrified. So I told my supervisor, I said, listen, I'm not going to come do this every day and risk my life for no 55 cents an hour or 75 cents an hour. And They thought I was kidding at first, but when I took a day off, they then told me, "Oh, you have to come do this job or else," you know. And if I didn't do it, then I would get what was called a rules violation report, or 115. And the 115, that disciplinary report, that's the modern day whip. And that modern day whip is used to compel people to do things that they otherwise would not do. And the reason why it's so significant is because I had a life sentence. And as somebody that had a life sentence, I was scheduled to go before the Board of Parole hearings, and I could not have any 115s going to the Board of Parole hearings. And they know that. No 115s, no 128s, none of that. There's an underground regulation in the state that if a lifer is trying to get out, you have to be at least disciplinary free for 5 years, or 5 years disciplinary free at least. And if you're not at least 5 years disciplinary free with no write-ups, they won't even consider you for being released back into society. So if I was to receive that 115 for refusing to work, not only did it violate the underground regulation, but the actual law, Marcy's law, Prop 9, states that all denials start at 15 years. 15 years. The denial that I would have received from getting that 115 starts at 15 years. Then if there's mitigating evidence, they walk it down to 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, and then the lowest that they can go is 3 years. So there was no way that I could actually afford to receive that 115, having already been in prison for 22 years by that point, or 23 years by that point. So I expressed to my wife, I'm like, baby, you know, I don't want to continue to risk my life. And she was like, well, can't we do something about it? Can you do something about it? And hold on one second. Are you able to hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. And she said, well, can't you do something about it? And I said, well, the law is on their side because of the Constitution, article, the 13th Amendment. And she said, well, let's change the Constitution. You know, my wife, Jamelia Land, she's an activist also. And her response was, let's change the Constitution. And so I went back to my cell and I wrote an amendment to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 6 of the California Constitution reads, involuntary servitude and slavery are prohibited except as punishment for a crime. So when I initially wrote it, I got really extensive, you know, with my vision. And the reason why I did so is because everything that you said during the introduction, anytime that we make advancements in this country, there's always this pushback that they not only want to take us to where we started from, but they want to push us back even further than where we started from. Knowing that, having studied about Tulsa and the Reconstruction, and just watching what took place between, you know, with Barack Obama and then the so-called silent majority and Donald Trump, any gains that we make, it's always pushback. So I did not want to get this amendment in and have the language changed, only to have them then turn around and push us back. So when I initially wrote it, I wrote it with a number of safeguards in it that would also allow it to be like insulated and have supplemental legislation that would make it stronger and not so easy to overturn and get rid of. And so when I sent it out to my wife and she saw it, she presented it to then Assembly Member Sidney Lager. They couldn't believe that somebody who was in prison wrote the legislation, and that it was so, you know, so sagacious, far-seeing wisdom. It was so sagacious, and the vision was on point. But what Sidney Lager said was, it was so in-depth and extensive that they were concerned that if they presented it the way that I wrote it, that it might not make it through the legislature. So they asked me to just roll with getting rid of the exclusionary language and break it down to involuntary servitude and slavery are prohibited, period, without exceptions. So I did that. And Assembly Member Lager authored the bill. She's a true warrior queen for us. She authored the bill, and then she became a senator. She became Senator Sidney Lager, and now she's seeking to become U.S. Congresswoman Lager. Make sure y'all support and vote for her, because she's the truth. She has our back. She holds us down. She goes out on the front line just like we do, just in a political arena. And so I began leading along with my wife. So let me back up. So at this point, I'm the executive director of the Anti-Violence Safety and Accountability Project, also known as ASAP. I'm also the co-chair of the California Abolition Act Coalition. And there are a number of organizations that are part of our coalition throughout the state. And they trusted me, you know, to help guide this movement, something that we all know that has to be done. Not trusting me, but getting this work done, removing the vestiges of white supremacy from the California Constitution. And so we began this coalition from when I was inside. And I was doing press conferences over the wall phone. My wife and the senator and our coalition members stood on the Capitol stairs, held my picture up, and put the phone to the microphone so that I could speak and talk about the work that we were doing. So it actually started while I was incarcerated. And I just wanted to let that be known, because I don't want anyone to ever think because they're in a carceral setting that they still can't have an impact, because you can. You get your mind right, you apply yourself, you can affect change, not only in your immediate environment, but also beyond those walls and those gates, right? And so from that point, I wound up going to the Board of Parole hearings, and I got denied anyway at that time. They gave me like a 3-year denial. And so I went back, continued to do the same job, actually caught COVID-19, almost died, and I went back to the Board of Parole hearings for a 5th time, and I was finally found suitable. And I was released after serving 24 years in prison. And I've been out at this point right now, as we talk today, I've been out for 9 months. I served 24 years. I've testified twice before the California Senate within like the last 75 days. The bill passed unanimously through the Assembly, 59-0. I testified before the Senate Public Safety Committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee, and it passed unanimously through every subcommittee. But then, as you stated at the beginning of the introduction, white supremacy reared its ugly head on June 30th. And you had Senator Dodd and I forget the other KKK representative who began lying about what the bill was about. They began saying that the bill was not about ending slavery, but it was about making life easy on people who were incarcerated. And that's not true. And so what wound up happening, they manipulated the procedures and the rules to the point that the bill wasn't even voted on that date. It kind of just ran out of time. They ran the session out of time because that was the last day of the session, June 30th. And in order for us to make it onto the ballot for 2022, we would have to be advanced out of the Senate on June 30th, and they knew that. So they manipulated the rules so that we couldn't. And then something else that took place was the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance came out with a report stating that they were in opposition to ending slavery because it would cost $1.5 billion a year if my bill got passed. Now, I want to be clear on that, why this is so important. Aside from all the numbers that you just named, the 100 trillions and the billion and all the stuff that we owe just because of our basic contribution to building this whole country. We're not even going to talk about that part yet. You know what I mean? Just the fact that they said that 1.5 billion would be too much to end slavery, although they make $11 billion based on the services and the goods that are provided by people in the carceral setting. It's broken down like this. They get $2 billion in goods produced by prisoners, milk, the food, clothing, all of the goods that they produce, that people incarcerated produce for the state. This is not including the contracts with the big corporations, with Walmart, Avis Car Rental, Starbucks, Nintendo. This is not including none of those contracts. We're just talking about $11 billion that cost or saved because of the free labor that they get from people within the state here alone. $2 billion in goods, $9 billion in services, porters, kitchen workers, yard crew, culinary, library clerks, you name it. They call it support services, because without these support services, the prison can't stand. The prison can't run without all of this free labor. And what the problem with that, among other things, so let me back up before I go there. So the 1.5 billion that they were crying about, even if you subtracted the 1.5 billion from 11 billion, you still have 9.5 billion surplus. So to say that 1.5 billion was too much to remove the vestiges of white supremacy and slavery from our Constitution and end slavery was a total farce and a sham, which makes me really concerned about the governor and his intentions and what's going on, because the Department of Finance comes directly out of the governor's office. And how would he going to turn around and support creating a reparations task force, but then don't support ending slavery? So what's his long-term goal? What's really going on? It's a cause for concern.
Well, if I could jump in on that point, don't lose your thought.
Okay.
Governor Newsom has designs to run for president. What I have figured out, my third eye, my ancestors, my inner Christ has shown me, is that he's grifting off of reparations to sheepwalk American freedmen to these polls to push the button for our own erasure and replacement with this immigrant class that he's spending a fortune on. And so this is how you know that both the Democrats and the Republicans suck. They both suck, and we must weaponize the vote. We must and socialize this suffering, because Governor Newsom has aspirations to do to the country what he's done to California. And I finally figured it out when I saw that the illegal immigrants now outnumber American freedmen by 300,000. We are 2 million within the state, and the undocumented is 2.3 million. He just gave them driver license, Medi-Cal, jobs, and protections from deportation. Now, if you're really about reparations, you can't be about immigration. You especially can't be about illegal immigration, because what you're really doing is using our reparations to make these illegals citizens before stroking a check to us. And so this has become the grift. And I see it loud and clear. And as I listen to you, it's even made more clear to me what he is doing. Because you can't be both pro-immigration and pro-reparations when you're giving away our reparations and protections to folks who have broken the law, and you want to label them asylum seekers, and you want to make sanctuary cities and states in our communities to erase and replace us. You'd be hard-pressed to see American freedmen working in our neighborhoods anymore. I went over to, I was in Carson, Compton area, and I went into the Ralphs, and there was nothing but immigrants working in that store. I was hard-pressed to even find American freedmen customers. So that's what's happening. There's a huge grift on the reparations, and then there is our erasure and replacement with our vote. You get all these little grifts going on all throughout the country. They're grifting off of reparations for our people specifically to deliver them, their political offices in order to erase and replace us. But I'll take a breath and let you weigh in. I want to find out, before you lose your thought, how much money were you paid in these private prisons to do the job you did? How much money are these jobs valued at in the open market? And were you able to get employment, given that you've been out of the prison for about 9 months now?
So that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I heard you say that at the top of the show. And the fact of the matter is, the bill that I'm pushing is not about only changing this, because it's the Constitution. So it doesn't just affect private prisons. It affects state prisons as well, specifically. So this money that we're talking about, these billions of dollars, this is what the state prisons are saving. And I started at 35 cents an hour. 35 cents an hour is what I started at with this particular job. Now, over the course of the 24 years that I did, there were times when I got paid 8 cents, 5 cents, no cents. You know what I mean? But for this particular job, risking my life to go fight COVID, I started at 35%. I moved up to 55%. And after having a job for almost 4 years, I topped out at 75 cents an hour. Having that job almost 4 years, I topped out at 75 cents an hour. And so you are very, very laced. You are very intelligent, and you do a lot of research, and you were able to make connections about things like with the immigration and the reparations that I haven't even thought of or considered. You know, my wheelhouse, my kin has for the most part been dealing with the imprisoned industrial complex and the beneficiaries of it, and rehabilitation and ending slavery. But you made a great point when you drew the correlation between the governor and how it impacts reparations, how they deal with immigration. And so what you made me think of is, how could he be pro-reparations but anti-abolition? Because to me, even the celebration for Juneteenth is premature. How can we celebrate ending slavery when we still fighting to end slavery today? It's premature. And it causes people to think that we're free and that slavery is done. And they put their guards down, they put their guns down. But the fact of the matter, I don't mean like literal guns, but you know what I mean? Like they drop their mind.
Their
Yeah,
ballot is their bullet. I've been teaching the people that your ballot is your bullet. Go ahead.
100%. Thank you. Like Malcolm X said, you know what I'm saying? And so when people think that slavery is ended, when we present this to them, they say, oh, how is this slavery? How is slavery ended? It's over with, you know, Juneteenth, and people are in prison because they deserve to be in prison and should be in prison. And all these bright ideas that they think come from their own selves, but they're only repeating what their oppressors have told them because they're not being autonomous in their thought, right? So the fact of the matter is slavery never ended. Clear, cut, and dry. The whole economic system, the whole engine for Western civilization is built on our backs. It's from this whole business model of slavery, which is at the core of American economics. And it's not wishful thinking. This is not something I'm making up. This isn't something you need only research. You need only look at the Constitution. Matter of fact, the federal Constitution specifically stated that involuntary servitude and slavery are prohibited except it's punishment for a crime. So when I have these discussions with people and they say, well, it ended and how is this that? You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take anybody in our coalition's word for it. Look at what the law says. The law uses these words: involuntary servitude and slavery are prohibited except as punished for a crime. Meaning it was never ended, it was only conditioned. And what it was conditioned on was a felony conviction and a fake due process machine. Once they take you through their 10.9.837 PK12 due process modulator, you turn your ass into a slave. I don't give a fuck who you are. Excuse me, I don't care who you are. Anyone can be turned into a slave. You know what I mean? And that's what people are not cognizant of. And the same model that we see today is the exact same model that was created back in 1865 when they passed the 13th Amendment. And what most people don't know, and this is a very subtle but very important point, in 1865, at the so-called conclusion of the Civil War, when they presented the 13th Amendment, it was presented in like maybe the first 3 months of the year, January, February, March, somewhere up in there, and then they stalled it. They stopped it. And while they stopped it, they then presented the black codes. After they presented the 13th Amendment, they presented the black codes in like South Carolina, other southern states, and they ratified them. Then after they passed the black codes, which is the loophole, once they put the way to capitalize off the loophole in place, then they came back in November and passed the 13th Amendment. So what does that mean? That means that when they set it up, involuntary servitude and slavery being prohibited except as punishment for a crime, they then created crimes that could easily take people off the streets to feed the amendment that they just created, because now it was all right for the same people who were just free to all of a sudden be snatched up for vagary, to be snatched up for loitering, to be snatched up for not having a job, you know what I mean, or so-called stealing a pig or stealing something to eat. And they will put them in prison and then say, well, it's a $500 fine. Our people were fresh off the plantation. No one was running around with $500 or $300 or $200 and any of that. And they say, okay, well, you need to pay your debt to society. When we hear that language today, most people don't even realize that that language has its origin straight in white supremacy, and that's where it comes from. They'll tell you need to pay your debt to society, meaning you got to work off this unjust fine. You understand what I'm saying? That no one can pay for or afford, and most of the people didn't even make it out. They get a false charge, vagary, not having a job. They put them in there, make them work for a prison plantation or a labor camp, and they worked our people to death. You fast forward to today, it's the exact same model. Now the corporations that are benefiting are the same ones that I mentioned to you earlier, and so many more that people have no idea. These everyday corporations that we patronize are the same ones who are responsible for decimating our communities. So now you have modern day black codes, which are 3 strikes laws, life without the possibility of parole, which are gang enhancements, gun enhancements, all of these things that extend the sentences that are mandatory minimums. These laws are created by the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, which is a right-wing conservative think tank created by this guy named Paul Weyrich. And you find some of the largest corporations all throughout our country are all part of this. They have a criminal justice task force. They have a technology task force, a healthcare task force. They have a task force for every aspect of society that governs our lives, the social, legal, educational, economic, and political systems. I call them the sleep systems because they rock people to sleep and they don't even realize what's going on. Social, legal, educational, economic, and political. They have a task force for every one of those areas where they create model legislation and then they disseminate it across the country. And people who will fit.
Are the Democrats involved too, or are their hands clean?
No, hell no, their hands are not clean. So for me, I don't even care whether they're Democrat or Republican. To me, there's only one party, and it's the corporate party. The corporations run this country, and they make us think that, the Democrats against the Republicans. But when it's all said and done, the same Democrat that works for Walmart is the Republican works for Walmart too. The Democrat works for the California Department of Corrections. The Republicans work for the California Department of Corrections too. It's about money. It's about ideologies that find their origin at the province of this country. So when you fast forward to today with those new codes in place, as long as involuntary servitude and slavery are at the core of the Constitution, then those large corporations have incentives to support tough on crime legislation that decimate our communities because it creates a cheap labor force for them. They have a reason to support gun laws. They have a reason to support gang enhancements. And it's not because of the crimes that were committed or the victims or the survivors. It's not because of any of that. It's because it gives them a cheap labor force that allows them to cut costs and maximize profits, period. So when we see people running around tearing down statues, of white supremacy, the vestiges of white supremacy that they see, or changing street names, that's important. I understand that. I respect that. However, the statues are not as crucial as the statutes. So instead of just tearing down statues, we have to tear down statutes because the statutes are the laws that were created back when we were not even seen as human beings. And today they're still on the books and they serve as the portals for the white supremacist ideologies that now manifest today and influence all of our circumstances. So that's why it's so important to get up into the law and change the governing documents of the states and of the countries. Because if we don't, we still allowing that beam me up sky, that portal to be open so that all the Confederates, all of the racists, all the white supremacists, all the slave owners can still have their will carried out to this very day. Right? Now, that's one part of it, ending slavery and involuntary servitude. The other part of that is as long as forced labor is at the core of the penal system, then forced labor and cutting costs for organizations takes precedence over rehabilitation and helping people heal. A moment ago, when you were talking about the money that could be allocated towards the freedmen, well, we have people who find themselves in a carceral setting and most of the time don't even know how the hell they got there. I was one of them. But I took that time to sit down and read and learn, and I realized how I got there. I realized how I got there. I'm also the pioneer of the theory of emotional illiteracy-based criminality. And that theory posits that no one is born bad, no one is born evil, but we adopt criminality as a coping mechanism for unprocessed traumas. So with that said, they'll lock us up and throw away the key and say that we're incorrigible. But that's only because it maintains a labor force for them. And when I got out, you asked me about being able to get a job. Yes. Long as forced labor takes place over rehabilitation, people will continue to walk out and recidivate and not have the resources that they need in abundance in order to step back out and be the contributing citizens to society that we are told that they should be or would be when they come out of the prison system. You can work inside of prison for 10 years, have the same job for 10 years. You will not walk out with any money. You will not walk out with any certifications. You will not walk out with the ability to have an employer or a former employer write you a letter of support or vouch for you. Nothing. You can have that job for 10 years. And if you say no to the job, you get that 115 I told you about earlier. That doesn't make any sense because the popular narrative that we're told is that people are, that's right. We're told that people go to the prison to rehabilitate, to come out better than they were. And if they don't, it's because they chose that. But the fact of the matter is the way it's designed, it's not designed to really rehabilitate people. The people that come out have really buckled down like myself and got what they needed, not because the state really provided it. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's important for us to understand that, especially if you have somebody in a carceral setting, not to see your loved one through the eyes of the oppressor, because they make it difficult for you. You get a 115 or a 128 because one of these correctional officers came to prison with a hair up their ass, or they found out their wife is cheating on them, or their daughter having sex with a black dude or a Mexican dude or somebody they don't like, and you look like them. And next thing you know, you show up and you get a 115, and now your family is like, oh, you're not really trying to come home. You're not really doing your best, and it's not true. So I caution you not to look at your loved ones through the eyes of the oppressor. And then back to what I'm saying, as long as rehabilitation is not important as forced labor, we're sending people back out into society unprepared to re-enter society. And no BS, a person on parole, I believe, is worth like $76,000. A person inside a prison now is like $100-something that they're worth. So technically, you are really worth more to them inside of the prison than you are on outside of the prison. Most people don't know that. So it gets so deep. And that's why it's so important for us to really pay attention to the California Abolition Act Coalition and the work that we're doing trying to get this overturned, because it impacts like every aspect of our lives. When you have Walmart, when you have FedEx, Avis, Nintendo, Victoria's Secret, Starbucks, when you have a Compaq, oh my God, it's like everyday people that y'all see and spend money with. You don't even know that they're getting their stuff packaged by people in prison. You don't even know that they call center. You thinking you calling somebody, they might be in the Philippines or in New York, and you're talking to a person that's straight in prison. Then most of the times when you get out, they won't even hire us to work for them. We can work for them in prison, but we can't work for them when we get out. All of this, it's just so corrupt and polluted. And then to make it make sense even more so, due process, the social contract, the penal system that we have right now, even the Constitution, the Mayflower Compact, when they first showed up with their ancestors and their pilgrims, whatever they want to call it, we weren't on top of that boat. We was cargo. We was property. They didn't even see us as human beings. You understand what I'm saying? So with that said, those same laws are still on the books from this to this very day when we were not even seen as human beings. So why would we evolve the automobiles that we drive, but not evolve the laws that govern us? If slavery was the best practice, then we would still be driving Model Ts and not a Model S. We would still be in a damn Henry Ford car instead of a Tesla. But that's not the case. Slavery was not the best practice, just like those automobiles were not the best practice, and we've evolved. So we need to evolve in the laws that govern us. It's common sense. And so this bill was opposed because the California Department of Corrections and all these mega corporations know that if involuntary servitude and slavery get taken off of the books, then they don't have that cheap labor force anymore. And then they would have to pay people a decent wage. That is something that I also want to highlight too, Angela. And the reason why is because I realize what their strategy is now. They don't want to come out and just say we support slavery. So what they're trying to do is jump on the bandwagon of people who saying that, are we trying to get people paid minimum wage? But that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is getting rid of the vestiges of white supremacy in this slavery. And by proxy, once you get that out, then you open the door to get a decent wage for the work that you're doing is on the inside. But it's not about just getting a person a wage. So what I see them trying to do is that old strategy of divide and conquer. The same senator died. He said, oh, I just supported a bill. They asked him about the bill that I wrote. He did an interview and he said, well, yeah, we're not this bill right here in this slavery. That's not what it is. I don't want nothing to do with that. Inmates should work. Yada, yada, bing, bang. I'm not saying people who are incarcerated should not work. So that's a lie. We're not saying that, because working is a part of being an everyday citizen, and you should have that instilled in you. No one's saying that. We're saying that you shouldn't force people to work for these corporations who don't give back to the people nor to the community. How am I paying my debt to society if I'm working for Walmart and Walmart ain't giving no discounts to my mama? Walmart ain't giving none of that money back. We're not paying our debt to society. And so the point that I was making before I went off on the tangent right there was, as long as involuntary servitude and slavery are at the core of the penal system, then we will never see people walking out of prison getting the help and making the changes that they truly need, because that's not the priority of the state. The priority of the state is cutting costs, maximizing profits, getting contracts, and decimating communities of color. You got gentrification, you got us killing us, you got us killing people that look like us or other minorities. I mean, the whole nine. And they just constantly fueling it. So what this senator died, he's saying that, well, I support raising the wages. He said they gave me a bill that states inmates should get paid $7 an hour. And so you have people who be getting paid 7 cents, 5 cents, and you tell them, well, you're going to get paid $7 an hour. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm getting paid $7 an hour. But what they're doing is they want to give them the money, but not get the language out of the Constitution. You understand what I'm saying? And by not removing the language out of the Constitution, it's just more of the same. And it actually insulates the practice and the policy. It makes it even worse. So what I would love everyone to really pay attention to is the discussion between wages and ending involuntary servitude and slavery, because it's not the same thing. We are talking about getting rid of the exclusionary language from the Constitution, getting rid of the vestiges of white supremacy from the Constitution, ending slavery in this state once and for all, so we can start coming with comprehensive approaches to dealing with people who find themselves in a carceral setting, so we can deal with trauma-informed perspectives and meet people where they are and help them become better situated when they step out to be the best version of themselves that they could be. By proxy, again, then people will make a decent wage. And there's nothing wrong with paying a decent wage to somebody in the carceral setting, because then they'll walk out, or even while they're there, they can pay child support, they can pay victims' fees, they can pay court fees, they can pay restitution, they can become taxpayers. We can increase the taxpayers' base if you pay the people in prison for the work that they're doing. So the whole argument about this is like only about money or this is about making life easy is BS. Will there be changes in that? Of course there will. But that's only because we're taking out the exclusionary language of the Constitution that allows for free labor or forced labor and slavery to persist to this very day.
I am just, oh my God. The audience is just totally, my co-host, I call them. They are totally riding with you every step of the way,
Thank
Mr.
you all.
Brown. Now it's 6:40. I done kept you 10 minutes over. Can I ask a
I
couple?
I know.
Can I ask just a couple more questions and maybe have you back?
Please, I would love to come back.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, what percentage of American freedmen are in these California prisons? How many of them are there for nonviolent offenses? And what do you think about Joe Crow's federal marijuana BS? And then I'll let you go.
Oh, wow. So those are all great questions. So I'm gonna answer the first one. At the onset of the show, I heard, was that Malcolm? Was that Malcolm speaking?
Malcolm?
At the onset of the show, you played somebody, and I heard him say, for too long, we have been the majority minority. Or maybe you said it.
That's Dr. Claude Anderson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm
Do you
familiar
know
with
Dr.
Dr. Claude
Claude,
Anderson.
who's been telling us for 40 years that we better wake up because the immigrants have come to erase and replace us? Well, I'm continuing in his legacy, sounding the alarm. But yes, at the top of the hour, at the top of the intro, that's Dr. Claude.
But Dr. Claude said that, we are the majority minority. Well, when it comes to the prison system, it's the opposite. We're the minority majority, right? Here in California, black people are like 6%, black males 5% of the population. But when you go inside the prison system, we're like 30% of the prison system. And overall, across the nation, we like the number's even larger than that. But it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it does make sense because we can trace it back to the corruption that's taking place and how we're being targeted by the laws, So I won't say it doesn't make sense because it does. It's designed this way. That's why it makes sense. But that doesn't make it right. Nothing morally wrong can be politically correct. I read that somewhere and I love that. Anything that's morally wrong can never be politically correct, even though they do their best to make it that way. So we are like 5% of the population here in California and close to 30% of the population in prison. As far as the number of people who are in there for nonviolent crimes, I don't know the actual percentage, and I don't want to just throw a number out there. But I do know a host of people while I was in there who had life sentences for nonviolent crimes. Speaking of which, let's talk about the 3 strikes law and just how this works, just to give y'all an idea. I might just max myself out. My next meeting is going to have to wait.
I'm sorry.
No, this is good. I'm loving being here. I'm enjoying the feedback from the audience, man. This is dope. This is really dope. And so When we talk about the American Legislative Exchange Council, because people always be like, oh, they not going to let that happen, or they going to get us, or they oppress us. But no one ever talks about who they are. Who is they? They have a face. They have a name. You know what I mean? And that's part of what we're talking about right here, right now. We're giving they a face. And so when we talk about this criminal justice task force that's under the American Legislative Exchange Council, their job is to produce model legislation, quote unquote, and then push it through the nation. So here in like 1992, I believe it was 1991, 92, when the three strikes law came to be, everybody thought it was, you know, because of poly class. The young Caucasian girl who was killed by a Caucasian man. I think he raped her and molested her and did all kind of messed up stuff to her. He got out of prison and did that. He had a rap sheet as long as my leg, probably longer, you know what I mean? And society, supposedly, California supposedly went up in arms, like, why is this guy out? How can he have such a long rap sheet, which was all probably planted, now that I look back at it. And what I realized is that the way that they work, these people like to hijack folks' tragedies and then do political drive-bys. They'll hijack a tragedy, yeah, and do a political drive-by. They'll make you think that they're caring for the folks and that they're riding for the people, but in essence, they just seen an opportunity to get their legislation passed. That's what took place with the three strikes law. They hijacked the tragedy of poly class. This white dude committed this crime, turn around and pass the three strikes law that don't really even affect the white folks like that. It's decimating communities of color, messing over black folks, messing over Hispanics, and just decimating communities of color, right? And so what most people don't know is that the three strikes law, they thinking it was a California thing. The same time it got passed in California, it got passed in like 30 states. 30 states. Then Joe Biden, you know, Joe Crow, your man's in them, him and Bill Clinton, they put together the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, also known as the 94 Crime Bill, the Omnibus Bill, that just had all of these moving parts in it, but just throwing money to all this law enforcement personnel and people across the nation. What they did then was they provided states buku money, all right, buku money in order to build private prisons and, you know, build more prisons and hire more people to fill the prisons, supposedly because of the war on drugs. But what they was really doing, they was making preparations to fill the prisons because of the war on drugs, which is a war on us, and because of the new laws that they were passing. And then as incentive, and you all can research this and verify everything that I'm telling you, as incentive, they told every state, if you make the three strikes law and codify it, if you codify it and put it in your state bill, in your state constitution or state laws or whatever, your state penal code, if you codify it and put it in your state penal code, then the federal government will give your state a grant to hire more law enforcement, to hire more correctional officers, and to build more prisons. So the whole thing came all the way from the top, all the way down to the bottom, and it put in place what we now see as mass incarceration. It opened the door to start locking people up. A person could have, like I had a cellie, he went to go cash a check, you know what I'm saying, whether it was a bad check or whatever he had going on, he went to go cash a check. When the lady was like, I need to talk to the manager real quick, he panicked and ran out and left his ID. They hunted him down and gave him 25 to life for that. Third strike. Dude stole a slice of pizza. Everybody know about that. Third strike. I knew so many people that had third strikes, 25 to life for stuff like this. And then makes it even worse, they can stay out of trouble for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Their last felony could have been in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, whatever. They're going to say, man, this is your third time getting in trouble. Life, 25 to life. You got men and women still in prison to this day trying to get out because they had a felony that they received. And the last two felonies they probably had were like decades ago because there are no laws on how it was supposed to be ran. So all of these things that we see, but we don't really know the inner workings of it and the truth and how it manifests. And then we form these opinions based on what has been fed to us. So it's important for us to be autonomous in our thought and our research and go find out for ourselves and then start voting. Because like you said, our vote, the ballot is the bullet. You know what I'm saying? This is where we have our power at. This is where we have to take our power back. We have to have this united, we have to be a united righteous mind state. You know, it's going to take a concentrated effort. But there's so many parts to this mass incarceration and prison industrial complex thing and how they utilize to continue the legacy of slavery and continue to dog us out and decimate our communities. And people benefiting all around the board. every lick of furniture that you see inside of a state agency created by somebody in a carceral setting. When you look at these street signs, you got some that are being produced by people inside of a job, maybe somewhere, some factory somewhere for the state. A bulk of that stuff coming from up out of prison. And people have no idea. So I just really ask you all to like pay attention. And as we continue to go back, because this fight is not over here in California, we're about to double back.
How can we help? How can we help? Give us action items and I'll save my questions for next time. You gave me your Cash App, so I'm going to type that in so we can bless you. We're going to bless your Cash App. Anybody contributing to the Reparationist perspective this evening, I'm gifting it to Mr. Brown. We want him back. We need him back. We love him. We embrace him. We're going to empower his movement. What else can we do to help before I let you go? Because I done kept you 20 minutes over your half hour.
You're going to make me proud.
What else can we do? No, brother, we love you. I'm so grateful God had us bump into each other on the beach.
As am I. I went back and talked about you the rest of the day. I thought that was divine. You really made my day. You lifted me up. I was standing there staring at the water. I just got out this transitional home. Wasn't really sure where I was going to go. I'm just, just telling my truth. And it was hard. And then with all this work that I'm doing fighting, it's like David versus Goliath. I'm leading this coalition across the state. And then I'm a part of the Abolish Slavery National Network. And we actually doing this work in 32 states across the nation. And we got 5 other states that's on the ballot. So California didn't make the ballot this year, but those other states modeled their legislation after what I wrote. And we were all part of the same crew, the Ballot Slavery National Network, and they're on the ballot for this year. So what you all can do, if you got family in Vermont, Oregon, Tennessee, Alabama, or Louisiana, tell them to go out and vote to support their bills to end the voluntary servitude of slavery in their states. That's first and foremost. Second of all, keep the conversation going here in Cali, man. Come out and support the California Abolition Act Coalition. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Just type in ACA 3 California Abolition Act and you will find it. I would definitely come back. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay. And you can find me on Instagram at sam.nathaniel.brown on Instagram. And it's an honor and a pleasure being here.
Okay, you already sent me that via text. Could you send me the rest via text when you get another window, Mr. Brown?
All right.
Let me just pray a prayer of protection over you, that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God really is, because you are the face of God, the voice of God, the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. With that being said, brother, I look forward to having you back. I love you, Freedman Strong.
I love you too.
And so do my viewers. We in this together.
100%. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. And thank you for everything. And I look forward to getting this past the finish line.
Yes, and we're going to get there together. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Peace.
Oh. Oh. Some things just leave me speechless, family. Some things just take my breath away. I want to thank each and every one of you for being over here on the live, for taking time out of your Thursday evening to bless me and Mr. Brown with your presence, with your love. That's why I love y'all, Freedman Strong. Y'all in there serving up the love. I want to give his Cash App, okay? I want to type it because I want you guys to richly bless this brother. He's only been out after serving a 24-year sentence in the California prisons, being used as a slave. I want you guys to bless him. He's absolutely right. When I walked past him, I knew it was divine intervention, because we had met at the Juneteenth Festival hosted by CJAC here in Southern California. And I was blown away when he spoke. And I took his information to bring him on as a guest. And then the Friedman world turned, and there you have it. If I don't do it immediately, and then God placed him directly in my path, and he was looking out on that beautiful water, and he was heavy, and we had a connection. And there was a sister that was working out. Now I had my hand on his shoulder and speaking life into this brother. And the sister walks by and she says, "Excuse me." She said, "For a minute there, the way you are, have your hand and you're over him, I thought you were praying for him." And I said, "I was. No, it wasn't on my knees praying like we're told to do. You and the inner Christ are one. And wherever there is a need for the inner Christ in you to speak up and out, you don't necessarily have to be in any type of position to appeal Christ to Christ." And I was sowing into him the truth of who he really is, because this movement work that he's been assigned is heavy on this brother. He is David, and this California system is the Goliath that the ancestors in his inner Christ sent him into war. And so in that moment, as I had my hand on his shoulder, I was just trying to steady myself on my Kangoo jumps, which are these big old boots on springs to help me to jog after 30 years with osteoarthritis of the knees. But I was balancing on him what she saw the truth of, which was a prayer. And then he came to this broadcast and has richly blessed us. So I'm going to share his Cash App, and I want us to send this brother a lot of love, because he and his wife could use the support. Anything you were intending on giving me, shout out to all of you who have blessed my Cash App. But if you send it to me, it's going straight to him, because he's doing the work. He's doing Friedman work. He is doing the work of the ancestors. Okay? All right. So let me look it up. I am just so full right now. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is rich. Y'all are rich. The ancestors have chosen us, right? So we must help those of us that are in the trenches getting this done. Okay. Let me get to his. I'm proudly sharing this. And I want you guys, listen, I see 33 watching from ScrewTube. I don't know how many are on Twitter, how many are on Facebook. But if we each gave $1, usually I get about 100 live views on the average. If we each gave $1, he would have about $100 to $125, right? Do what you can, family. Bless this brother. He is doing the ancestors' work. Hold on. So it's $ Sammy with a capital S, White Sox. So I'm going to type it. $ Sammy, SAMMY, White Sox. Okay? Now, his Facebook, you can find out how you can get involved, is Samuel. Oh, I misspelled his name. It is with an A. I thought the newspapers had misspelled it. Samuel, A-L. I'm writing it, typing it rather. Samuel Nathaniel. He got his whole government name. Brown. That's on Facebook. His IG is sam.nathaniel. Brown. Now, there's no reason for you not to learn how you can get involved. right? So I want to close with this article because he didn't have a lot of time. So I want to close with the article about what went down. It's a brief article, and of course I'm going to comment in between. Samuel Brown was on the front lines of the pandemic, sanitizing and disinfecting prison cells. Diagnosed with asthma, Brown, 45, said he feared contracting the virus. He wanted to quit his prison job. He couldn't. Quote, "My supervisor told me I had to do this job," Brown said. Me speaking. Uh, like I mentioned prior, we are now 2 million American freedmen, down from 17% of the population to around 3 to 5% max. And yet, the illegal, undocumented immigrants are 2.3 million, and Newsom just gave them driver license, Medi-Cal, jobs, and protections from deportation. And yet this brother had to work from, what he say, 35 cents an hour up to 83 cents an hour. And when he got out of prison, he can't even do a job commensurate with what he's skilled to do in the open market. They will not hire him because of his record. You see what I mean by the Democrats and the Republicans creating our issues and then wanting our vote to be the solution? Now, my Freedmen Protest voter strategy is about closing the borders and getting the illegals out. Because here in the state of California, when Trump was in office, our unemployment figures for American freedmen was 5%. As of April this year, it is 11%. I can only imagine what it is right now. Can't seem to find those numbers. So when Trump was in control of the borders, we didn't have 5 million immigrants flooding our cities, which these Democrats have conveniently made into sanctuary cities and states to genocide us right up out of it. And shout out to Enough is Enough and all the tribe that were over there in that 5-hour live this afternoon. But she was driven out of LA, akin to many of us being legislated out of LA. And we were over in that space talking about this very thing. And guess what, family? My support for my Freedmen Protest voter strategy is growing. And so what you have to understand, family, is that the only way we get our unemployment rates down is to get these immigrants out. We've got to put a moratorium on legal immigration, which means we cannot allow these 11 million DACA to get the citizenship they have been fighting so hard for. And when you withhold the vote, when you vote Democrat down the ticket, when you stubbornly say no tangibles, no vote, you are leaving the fate of our lineage in the hands of immigrants who seek to replace us and Crayola white supremacists who seek to erase us. And like Enough is Enough said in that beautiful live that I was on from at least my hair appointment was, let me see. I want to say from 11 until an hour before I was scheduled to come to you live. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 hours I was over in that space, spitting fire. Some of you may have been over there. But she absolutely said it best when she said, unakin to these immigrants who were taking the US dollar and farming it back to their countries, we have nowhere to go. We were on the bottom before the pandemic. The pandemic was sent to enrich the pharmaceutical industries and the government. And it was also, along with abortion, our euthanization. Many of you know I lost my mom late December 21 after she could succumb to 3 heart attacks after the booster. We have nowhere to go, family. This is it. If we don't show up to these polls in November style numbers and vote for closed border and vetted reparations candidates only, party be damned, it's a wrap. Because what it will do, if you do any of the other, no tangible, no vote, withhold the vote, dim down the ballot, it's going to send a signal to Joe Crow that it is okay to flood the country with 15 to 20 more illegals whom he will fight harder to give citizenship to, in addition to the 46 million legal immigrants here. You're talking 66 million immigrants or more with your vote. The Democrats are setting us up to vote for our own erasure and replacement. And you've been warned. Because as California goes, so goes the nation. So when you're doing the math, do your research. See that 66% of the Latinos voted for the Democrats the last election cycle. See that, I want to say 90%, 70%, something crazy, 92% of the Asians, 72% or 92%, look up the Pew Research, of the Asian community voted for the Joe Crow administration. So when we don't weaponize the vote after the Democrats have launched a missile directly in the heart of American freedmen to obfuscate giving us our reparations and protections, guess who's going to show up? These Latinas who sit up here and tell you that they're now in support of abortion. They're now in support of LGBTQIA. So when you don't show up, they will. Because when Joe Crow and his administration saw how they turned out the vote for the Democrats that last election cycle, that's when they went into full erasure and replacement mode of American freedmen. With our vote, 86% of our electorate having delivered them the White House. So when you see them giving our reparations and protections 40 going north, it's because of the outcome of that last election. With our votes, we delivered them, and all we've got is a hip hop month to show for it, a Juneteenth festival that, oh, by the way, we were already celebrating. Now it's a national holiday celebrated by those who've got our jobs paying American wages. That would be the immigrants who are now made wealthier than American freedmen and white folks. They get a paid holiday because we are no longer the majority in those positions. The immigrants and white folks are controlling employment at every level, from the low-skilled jobs all the way to the technical jobs. And that's whom you have to beg for a job from. The immigrants who seek to replace you and Crayola white supremacists who seek to erase you. Back to the text. Under state law, most California prisoners are required to work. Like many other states, California forbids slavery, but allows involuntary servitude to punish someone for a crime. Even if you're locked up for a nickel bag of funk, while the state out here turns a profit on marijuana and locks us out of ownership of the marijuana dispensaries in our neighborhoods. Back to the text. That distinction allows state prisoners and people in jail to work without many of the same protections, minimum wage and benefits, as other California workers. So that's what they're doing, family, pushing abortion, the private prison industrial complex on American freedmen, allowing these immigrants to come into our communities and terrorize us, because they have already said, and let me read it again because I think it's important to be reminded of what Efrain Rojas said. In case you forgot that I've been teaching you that he confirmed that they're here to replace us. Let me find it. This is important to read to you. Hold on, family. Uh-oh. Can y'all see me? I hope so. Hold on. I'm sorry, family. I should have had it at the ready. I don't want to detain you guys. I have so many screenshots of various things. Let me go to Racebook images. Hold on. Here we go. Efrain Rojas writes, I found your channel on YouTube and I want to share some insights on the Black-Brown Alliance charade. We Latinos are 50% of Los Angeles and will soon be a clear majority in California if we aren't already. You should be very, very concerned about this because we are not going to give up the special consideration for disenfranchised minorities. We will be the overwhelming majority, and we will assume for ourselves priority in government jobs, government contracts, subsidized housing, college admissions, etc. All the Black leaders in the Democratic Party have sold Black America out. You have voted for your own erasure. Or, me speaking, you have withheld your vote to your own erasure. Back to the text. Brown, Mr. Brown, and some state legislators have been trying to change that through a constitutional amendment that would outlaw involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. But they failed to muster enough votes before the deadline to put the proposed constitutional amendment, ACA 3, in front of voters in this November for midterms. And he explained why. You have to rewind if you're just getting here. The constitutional amendment passed by the Assembly in March had turned into a legislative nail-biter, but today the Assembly adjourned before the Senate voted on it, effectively killing it. But guess what they didn't kill, family? Many of you that have been rolling with me know this, that we've been fighting for reparations here. We've got a task force, and we recently, with the help of the nation, prevailed on lineage-based reparations. Reginald Jones Sawyer, one of the task force members who's for race-based reparations, created a bill to extend our reparations proposals an additional year when we are clearly out of time and being legislated out of here faster than we can get any cash in our people's hands. And he amended that bill to guarantee that he could change the members on that task force into race-based reparations supporters in order to derail our efforts to get reparations. He wanted to literally change out the 5 members that sit on that task force who voted in favor of lineage-based reparations 5-4. Ultimately, we did a call to action, and we got you guys in the nation to get on Governor Newsom's head to veto that bill. But do understand that the majority of the people out here that voted for it, all of them were Democrats. All of them were Democrats, and the majority were immigrant and white, Crayola white supremacists who voted to extend our reparations proposals and to give Reginald Jones Sawyer the power to replace the task force members that didn't vote for race-based reparations because we knew we could not prevail on race. This is what's happening with the LA City Council. They're making much ado about the racist taunts for the beautiful black boy that she called a monkey and threatened him with an inch of his life. But the bigger picture, family, is the fact that they illegally redistricted LA to get those city council seats and make sure no blacks could make that city council. Now they're in there. And if you don't vote down the line with them to erase and replace us all over LA, they will starve your businesses out and do all manner of things to derail your political aspirations. And so when you withhold the vote, this is the kind of Crayola white supremacist that's taking over in every branch of government, from the school board through the feds. And they're the ones that you're going to have to beg for your reparations from. Do you see how much of a grift this is to see every Democrat vote for an extension on our reparations and to give Reginald Jones Sawyer the power to replace the lineage-based reparationists that sit on that task force? These are the very people whom we need to green mark those proposals. Do you think it's going to be likely? Crafted by Mr. Brown while he was in prison and introduced in 2020 by then LA Assembly member Sidney Kamlager, the End Slavery in California Act had been sailing through the legislature for about a year. The proposal had no registered opposition or a single no vote in committees or on the assembly floor. Last week, though the amendment faced its first formidable challenge, the California Department of Finance opposed the plan, estimating it would cost $1.5 billion to pay prisoners minimum wage. And some Democrat and Republican lawmakers, my words, became wary. The amendment failed to pass the Senate. We've only got one black freedman senator out here in the state, Senator Bradford, who was for lineage-based reparations. The amendment failed to pass the Senate when 6 lawmakers voted against it June 23rd, while another 13 did not record a vote. Mr. Brown just explained to you, their slavery in the not-so-new prisons is profits, as is the war on drugs, as is the war on poverty. We must make the Democrats pay dearly, because truly, we've been their loyal voter base. We've been their loyal lapdog since FDR, which is how we got on the bottom of this Titanic called America with 3 Ks as the anchor of this country's capitalism, right? We must close the borders and jointly make them pay for several election cycles until they're begging us to cut our checks. The only way it ever happens is to bring them to their knees and make them crawl on their bellies like they're making American freedmen crawl on their bellies. Back to the text. Constitutional amendments require 2/3 yes votes to clear each floor, and even then would require voter approval. This amendment rips the Band-Aid off of wounds that have not healed, Kamlager told Cal Matters this week. We figure out ways to be innovative and aspirational when it comes to women's rights, immigrants' rights, environmentalism. Why can't we use the same muscle when it comes to slavery? I'll tell you why. Profits. David A. Carrillo, executive director of Berkeley Law's California Constitution Center, said in an email that involuntary servitude is akin to slavery. No, it is slavery, Mr. Carrillo. If voters were to ever pass such an amendment, he said, the state could be forced to change its regulations. Currently, all able bodied prisoners are required to either work or participate in rehabilitative programming or a combination of the two. Excuse me. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation declined to comment on the proposal. However, department spokesperson Dana Seamus told Cal Matters in an email that incarcerated people receive credits off of their prison terms for participation in work assignments as well as rehabilitation, education, and self-help programs. I think that they would prefer to be paid an American wage in the open market so that they could support their wife and children. Every job is dignified, and they are jobs that are similar to those outside of prison, she said. The work assignments teach valuable skills, she stated, helping to prepare them to go back into their communities. Mr. Brown just shared with you about how undignified his job was, where he had to go into the psych wards where the prisoners have lost their minds and wiped feces all over the walls in the height of COVID and was told to get back to work. And he also shared with you how they do not hire him, no matter how skilled he is from prison slavery. They don't give him the job. Seamus also said declining or refusing to work can lead to discipline. Mr. Brown already told you how refusing to work could add to their prison sentences and deny them an opportunity to come before the board for parole. Punishment includes housing changes and write-ups that can affect a person's parole, among other things. They have various ways they force you, said Mr. Brown, who was released this year from California State Prison in LA County. After serving 24 years, he's been free for 9 months. That's why that brother was on that water, talking to his inner Christ about what should he do now that ACA 3, which he authored, didn't even make it to a vote. That's why we have to be there for each other, family. We can't be the ones out here doing the Crayola white supremacist work of tearing each other down. We must stop whatever we're doing to extend love. I've done it several times. I'm no martyr. But when I've seen police kneeing on a brother who was homeless, about 20 of them race soldiers was out there. One was kneeing in his back. He must have weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. I was dressed to the nines, headed to a Stevie Wonderful concert. And the ancestors nor my inner Christ would allow me to rest. I pulled my convertible over with my daughter and her very dear sister friend in the car. I left them in the car to go sit in the middle of it. I don't advise this, but there was something in me calling me to go out there and to let those glacier donkeys, those Crayola white supremacists know that that brother was covered by an educated sister. I found a bench right in front of that brother, and I sat my fine ass right in the midst of it. Okay? Now, you had Crayola all around, but nobody was telling those officers to get up off that brother. And I told those officers to get up off that brother before I turned my camera on. And they tried to jump bad with me. And I let them know that I am a litigator by trade. And this other woman who had been standing there watching, she was a litigator too. And she was sharing with me that she's been observing the mistreatment of this brother all this time. And they want to tell me he's squirmy. Yeah, he's squirmy because your knee is in his back. What else do you expect him to do when you look like you weigh a good 230? This brother weigh 100 pounds soaking wet, and your knee is in this brother's back trying to kill him. I'm telling you to get your knee up out of his back. And that brother looked at me, and I said, brother, these race soldiers ain't playing. They are here to erase and replace us. I need you to please stop squirming so this race soldier will get his knee up off your back. Now, I'm here to tell you, I've got my children in the car just a block away, and they are scared for not just you, but they're terrified for me. Because these race soldiers don't give a damn about either of our lives. No matter how educated and dressed up I am to go down here to this concert, they don't give a damn. They will execute us both right now if you don't cooperate. Now, I'm here to tell you, I am not leaving your side. I will wait until the ambulance comes for you and takes you away alive. That's my commitment to you. And your commitment to me needs to be stop squirming. He stopped. They lifted their knee. The ambulance came. We sat in silence, and I stared every one of them in their eyes. But I kept my eye on the brother, like we here. We are here. I'm not leaving. And honey, when they safely got him on that gurney to take him to get some help, because you could tell it was a mental thing. You could tell if you clean this brother up, he was beautiful before they made him homeless through legislation. He had no drawers on coming out of his pants. But I saw the Christ in him, and our Christ met up, and we got it done. He got out of there alive. When they closed that door, I sashayed my 6-foot ass up on off that bench and went to my car, and my children were happy to see me. My daughter and her friend. I only have one daughter. And I could be at peace, because guess what I couldn't live with, family? The news at 11 that would have reported he was executed by these race soldiers. That's what I couldn't live with. So I'm no martyr, but I had to choose in that moment, which could I live with? And there comes a time in your advocacy where you are going to have to decide, which can you live with? Can you live with your erasure and replacement, or can you live with voting for a closed border candidate, even though they may be a repugnant clan, to save your line? To at least allow your line to tread water until we can get a bunch of Marcel Dixons running for Congress all throughout the country. There's a time when you have a come to enter Christ meeting, and you get to a place where you say, enough is enough. And so that's the love I stopped my world to extend to Mr. Brown. And he has richly blessed us, and he will be back. Don't disparage your brothers and sisters. They've been made homeless. They've been made insane. They've been made black on black crime and murder. That's what happens when you starve the community of resources and you miseducate them for the preschool to prison pipeline. I'm going to pray us out. I'm getting very, very full right now. And I don't want to be on the live crying. I'm exhausted. I've been up for hours. Because I can't sleep now that the midterms are upon us, and I'm having to fight people in the movement that I believe have been compromised, who are appealing to the masses to withhold the vote. So I've been working overtime, and your sister's exhausted. So I can rest on this square and be at peace with this segment, that it's richly blessed you in the same way it's richly blessed me. I really, really, really need you to bless Mr. Brown and his family. I'm going to bless him as soon as I get off the live, and I'm happy to do so. And I want you to help make my videos go viral. I really do. We are out of time, family. I want you to go out and love on our freedmen. I want you to gift them with money blessings, gift them with food. Because if you're on this live, you are in the overflow. You may not recognize it, but you are. So share what you have. Don't disparage them. Don't talk ill against them. Because the ancestors chose you to be the Christ in their experience, right? I know I've been chosen. And I said yes to my inner Christ. Send me, I'll go. And until we reach that place where we take our inner Christ and align it with the lesser of us inner Christ, when we ultimately do that, we will get everything we are owed. We will get up off this bottom, and we will enable our millennials, our Gen Zs, to really thrive and flourish. But that means returning the missile to the Democratic Party for using us to erase and replace us. They don't allow you to stand your ground. They are still executing unarmed Black men, women. So your ballot is now your bullet. And I need you to help me spread my Freedmen Protest voter strategy straight from the ancestors. Because what I know about these Democrats is that when they have a trifecta, we are the only ones in distress. It's time, family, to weaponize our vote and socialize our suffering. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever Freedmen and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. Yes, you are. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. If no one's told you today how much they love you, know this. I love you. Freedmen strong. The ancestors are proud of your courage. And until we meet again, family, prayerfully on Sunday, I've got a beautiful Freedman Republican running for mayor in D.C. She will be my guest on Sunday, I think around 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until we meet again, family, I want you to make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. And until we meet again, family, I'm believing for each and every one of us a ton of peace, love, and reparations, reparations, reparations.